Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 10th of October. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. As you know, the Russians started attacking the Ukrainian infrastructure in Ukrainian facilities all along the Ukrainian territory. If we take a look at the Western source of map, we won't find any interesting information on that map. The situation is regular, just icons of bombings, of some kind of notifications and so on. But if we take a look at the Russian sources map, you're going to see that entire Ukraine is full of different icons, mainly of icons of fire. This is exactly the places where the Russians attacked and using their drones and using their air rockets and so on. According to the Russian sources, some Russian sources, they used around 202 rockets or drones on the territory of Ukraine since this morning. So that's a lot. And the Ukrainian sources are saying that they managed to shut down some number of these rockets, but today we got some update from the Ministry of Defense. He reported about 47 units that were shut down by the Ukrainians. And if we're talking about 202, so it's less than 25%. And that was the first goal of the Russians during this day, and the main goal was to shut down the Ukraine anti-aircraft system and to overload the system, and they were successful with that because we mentioned and we saw that overloading of the Ukrainian system was around, let's say, 11 or 10 a.m. and after that the accuracy and the quality and of their aircraft system, anti-aircraft system, was reduced till zero. And starting from noontime, the Russians attacked and hit everything they wanted to hit. If we're talking about the targets, mainly the Russians were trying to attack the some kind of energy facilities. Let's take a look at the Kiev. There is a power plant in the middle of the Kiev, so this area, let's say that the Russians were trying to attack. If we're talking about, there are a lot of icons in the middle part of Kiev, but if we're talking about this area, there are a lot of places where the Ukrainians special forces are located, special, like some kind of special departments and so on. And as you can see, the Russians were trying to get these special departures because, if you remember, yesterday Putin told that that executor and the person and the forces that ordered the action on Crimea Bridge was the Ukrainian special forces. So that's why special forces from now on is the legal target for the Russians. Now let's move next. To other towns. Let's take a look at Kanyev. As you can see, there is an icon that the Ukrainians' air defense worked. So I believe that they managed to shut down some rockets in this area that were heading towards Kiev. Now we're moving to Kharkiv. If we're talking about the Kharkiv, as you can see, the Russians attack in other places with the electricity facilities. Using this area supports the entire Kharkiv with electricity. This is not a power plant, but it's some kind of energy facilities that power plant uses for supplying of entire town. But as you can see, the Russians targeted this area and they were pretty successful. And as you know, today we got update that Kharkiv is without electricity and Kharkiv still without electricity. I'm doing this video at 7 p.m. of local time. So we can say that those attacks were pretty successful, at least in this area. Now let's move to the direction of Zaporozhye. As you can see, there are also some kind of icon, and somewhere in the middle of Zaporozhye, it's like this icon says that there is some kind of anti-aircraft system. I believe that Zaporozhye was pretty successful against the Russian rockets and so on. If we are talking about Dnipro, this town, the Russians destroyed some kind of company that is responsible for some kind of LAN and connections, internet, and communication between towns, between companies, and so on. And this building was destroyed in Dnipro. Very important losses. Now we're moving to Kryvyi Rog. There are also a lot of towns. As you can see, there was attack of drone were spotted in this town, and we know that the Russians are using drones in the south mainly. So maybe, so as you can see, the Russians were using drones, at least in Kryvyi Rog. Now we are moving to Nikolaev. There also were some attacks, but as you can see, the attack was somewhere on the bank of the river. I'm not sure I see anything very important in this area, so I believe that maybe the Russian got something, but for now I can't tell you the real value of the attack in Nikolaev. In Odessa, there was explosions in the middle of the town. I mean, maybe there was some kind of bases or some kind of base buildings of special forces, but there are also an icon of air defense. So I believe that the Ukrainians were successful in Odessa as well. At least not for 100%, but at least they managed to shut down something. Now we're moving to the west part of Ukraine. As you can see, every single capital of every single region in this area was under Russian attack. There was an attack over another energy facility in the town by the name of Zhytomyr, as I understand, yes. And as a result of that attack, the entire town was and still without lights, so the light has gone after that attack. Now we are moving to Vinnytsia, another attack in Vinnytsia, somewhere in the middle of the town, as I believe. So maybe the Russians missed the target, at least in this area. Now we are moving to Khmelnytsky. The same, there's like an icon of attack, but at least this icon doesn't show anything or something important in this town as well. Now we're moving to Ternopil. As if we're talking about Ternopil, there is an Impox attack somewhere in the residential area, maybe some kind of base, nothing important. If we're talking about these areas, you can see the Russians attack another power plant in the west of Ukraine, in Ivano-Frankovska area. And if we're talking about Lvov, today Lvov was without light as well, and as I believe that the Russian managed to attack something very important. So as you can see, some sources are saying that was response to the Ukrainians' attack of Crimea Bridge. And if we take a look at this map shows some it's a Russian sources map. They have prepared this map showing like the real picture in Ukraine. As you can see, this map has been updated according to the new borders. It's the Russian opinion, Russian understanding of the situation, and there are three at least icons: the colors black one, white one, and some black and white color. If we show the black color, that means that this region is without light. If we're talking about white, that means that everything is fine, no problems, and we have a gray light color. That means that 50-50, that sometimes some region has electricity and some region doesn't have any electricity at all. So if we take a look at this map, we're gonna see that the Russian targets, that they're trying to, first of all, they're trying to destroy supply and support regions in Ukraine. If we're talking about west of Ukraine, about this area, you can see that Lvovskaya, Khmelnytskaya, Ivano-Frankovskaya area, these regions is without light, and this is the main supply and support road for Western weapons. So that's why the Russians were trying to shut down these towns and to reduce the supply and support of Western weapon in direction of Ukraine. Another area is Kharkiv area, the Kharkiv, Poltava, and Sumy region. It's the east part of Ukraine. This part, and as you can see, there are a lot of railroads. This Poltava, this Kharkiv, and this Sumy, and three main railroads that connects, let's say, Kiev and west of Ukraine moves through these towns, through Kharkiv, Poltava, and Sumy. So that's why by destroying energy facilities in this town, the Russians managed to solve the problem with supply and support of Ukrainians. And of course, we understand that if the Ukrainians were planning to start any offensive operation in the north of LPR, now they are not able to do this because now they can't just regroup or move forces in this direction. So for now, they're freeze, they're pinned down without any possibilities to be mobile and so on. And also the Russians were trying to attack the south of Ukraine. And we understand why, because during these days, previous months, the Ukrainians were attacking the Kherson, and they were trying to penetrate this area, but now I believe that they're not able to do this as well because of out of possibilities to be mobile and to be flexible in the same situation as Zaporozhye. As you know, we were expecting that the Ukrainians will try to start another counteroffensive in the operation in this area, and I believe that after today's attack, they are not able to do this, or at least they won't be able to do this for the next few days. If we're talking about the real damage that the Russians managed to deal, most of the experts are saying that the damage, of course, is big, but mainly that was some kind of media victory, because all the damage that the Russians deal today during the day is possible to fix during the next 20 days. So that means that it's nothing. So if it's possible to fix during the next 20 days, that means that it was a damage, but it's not like a tragic or something, I don't know, impossible for the Ukrainians. Now the question for the Russians: are they planning to stop, or are they planning to continue? Because, for example, if the Russians are planning to continue tomorrow to do the same thing as they did today, that means that we can add another 10 days, for these 20 days. So that means that the Ukrainians will be able to restore their economy, their infrastructure, and so on in the next 30 days. And if we're talking about months, I believe that that's a lot, because during the months, at least during the months, the Russians will be able to complete mobilization, to complete training, and to deploy at least the first 100,000 soldiers on the south of Ukraine. If the Russians are able to continue this shelling for not just for today, tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow, so I believe that we can add another 10 days for this delay. So that means if the Russians are able to complete to do the same as they did today, tomorrow, and the day after, that means that the Ukrainians need another 40 days to restore the infrastructure and economy. So as you can see, as we understand, if the Russians are able to support the same level of attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and in Ukrainian facilities by the end of this week, that means that Ukrainians will be able to restore everything that was that destroyed just in 2 or 3 months, or in 2 months. So by the end of this year, and we understand that who knows if it possible. If it will be possible to do this by the end of this year. Very interesting, and we'll see tomorrow, because today most of the sources were saying that the Russians did at least 3 waves of attacks. And we can split the entire territory of Russian Federation and so on into 3 areas that the Russians are using for attacks. The first one is the Black Sea. Of course, there is a fleet, there is submarines, there is a lot of ships that the Russians are able to use to attack the Ukraine. So this is the first area that the Russians are able to use for rocket attack. The second area is the Caspian. This area, to be more precise, the area around Astrakhan. So today the Russians use this area, this square, to attack the Ukraine. So the first one, the second one. The third one is around the Russian border, the Ukrainian border in Belgorod, Kursk, and this is we can say, the third place that the Russians are able to use to attack the Ukrainians' facilities. And the fourth one is Belarus. So as you can see, the Russians have at least 4 places where they have a lot of weapon, a lot of carriers. It's very important, carriers. So the equipment and the weapon that are able to carry the weapon and the rockets. So as you can see, there are 4 places that the Russians are able to use their carriers to attack the Ukraine. Belarus, the border, the area between Ukraine and Moscow, let's say, the Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod region, the Black Sea region, and the Astrakhan or Caspian region. 4 places. And today the Russians at least used all of them. There were some interesting updates from the territory of Belarus, because we haven't seen any video confirmation that the forces, the Russians from Belarus, that the Russians were using the territory of Belarus to attack Ukraine. But if we're talking about the Ukrainians, they were saying that there were some attacks from Belarus, and mainly the Russians were using drones to attack Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. And at least there were no updates and no confirmation, no video reports of the fact that the Russians used rockets or missiles from the territory of Belarus. Only drones, if there were, because for now there are also no confirmation about that. But anyway, as you can see, the Russians have a lot of different types of weapon they can use, and they have, and of course the fifth area that the Russians are able to use is aircraft carriers. So five places or 5 units that the Russians are able to use to attack Ukraine: Belarus, Belgorod, Kursk, Bryansk border, Black Sea border, Caspian border, and of course aircraft carriers. And today they were using aircraft carriers as well. And I repeat my question, are the Russians planning to do this tomorrow? If they're not planning to do this, of course, they achieved some kind of 2 weeks of delay before the next steps. Now the Ukrainians, they need to do something to fix all these issues. And after that, the Russians will repeat, or maybe we are going to see some kind of negotiation process. Who knows? So let's wait for this night, for upcoming night, and let's wait for tomorrow morning. I think my projection, if you ask me, I believe that the Russians are not planning to do anything tomorrow. Or at least they will take some pause. They will try to act like this, trying to where we've shown you our possibilities. We asked you to stop shelling, to start negotiation, to move your forces from the territory of DPR and as far as possible from Donetsk. We asked you. Now we are going to watch if you understand the things that we ask you, and if you don't understand, then we will do this one more time. And I think that the Russians will repeat all these massive attacks every single 10 days. So it's also an option, and they will show the Ukrainians, like they will make some kind of understanding among the Ukrainians that there is not just like attacks without any understanding what the Russians are attacking. They will show you that we attacked, then we are going to follow your actions. And if we are going to make another aggressive actions, then you're going to see consequences. So they will try to build some kind of schema or some kind of pattern in the Ukrainian minds, though. Then soon they will understand. Let's say if the Russians are able to support these attacks for 2-3 weeks, like not weeks, but 2-3 periods, that means that on the third or the fourth of that periods, the Ukrainian civilians, they will understand that the real problem is not about the Russians, that they're attacking without any understanding what they're doing, and that they're so like aggressive and they just want to kill the Ukrainians. No, they will understand that Ukrainian authorities are doing something wrong. Because as soon as these authorities do something wrong, the Russians started massive shelling. And with help of these tactics, the Russians will try to prepare some kind of ground in the territory of Ukraine, and they will try to force the civilians not to hate the Russians because they're attacking, but to hate their own authorities, because all these consequences, all these attacks is the result, is the answer to the decision that Ukrainian authorities are doing or planning to do. So this situation for today, if we're talking about the front line is stable. The Russians reported about the same picture, the same stories around Kupiansk. Another 14th, 92nd mechanized were attacked, lost around 80 soldiers, another attempt of crossing this Zhiribets river, another commandos were destroyed, and so on. So no changes. And I believe that we won't see any changes for the next few days, because we're talking about the Ukrainians. They are not able to support any offensive operation without logistic. And if we're talking the Russians, they don't need to do this because they don't have reserves for that. The only movements we might see around Bakhmut, because the Russians, they don't stop in this area, and they continue shelling and pushing in this area as they did before. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, and join my Patreon. Have a good day. Bye bye.